All right, guys, no doubt at this point you have seen Luke Thomas's absolute evisceration of Mike Coppinger all over social media, particularly Boxing X, but also on YouTube and other outlets. Um, Two of them got in sort of a back and forth with some Twitter comments, and Luke Thomas just let him have it. Called him a proper garden tool and a variety of different usages of the term. So why am I talking about this? I think there's something that needs to be addressed in the world of boxing media. And this is true for all sports and even news. And I don't talk politics on this channel. I don't even try to go in that direction. There may be some crossover here, and if you see that, well, then that's what you see. But we live in a world now in boxing media that is completely different than it was 20 to 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there were still vestiges of print media that were very solid. You had USA Today, the New York Times, LA Times, Washington Post. These papers had permanent writers on their staff completely dedicated to boxing. Then in some of the more regional papers, but still in big media markets, you would see writers who covered several different beats, one of which was boxing. Same thing with certain news television networks, etc. Of course, sports networks would have people dedicated to covering the sport of boxing. These guys would then get credentialed to go to fights and would cover what they saw without real interest in the promotion, or I'm sorry, without real dedication to the interests of the promotion. They would objectively cover an event, and then they would write about it, and those stories would go into syndication in local newspapers throughout the country. Even where I grew up in central Louisiana, I still remember the day after Mike Tyson was knocked out by of course, Buster Douglas in Tokyo. I was like 5 or 6. The next day it was on the front page of the Alexandria Daily Town Talk, which will not be confused with the New York Times in terms of its reach. This was a different era. And for those of you who are, probably under 30 even, or under 25, this is, you have no idea what that's like, right? And it wasn't just boxing. I remember my grandfather, who was from Cuba, was very interested in competitive chess. When he lived with us in central Louisiana, you could only get the Sunday New York Times, and you could only get it on Monday because that's the way it was back then. And he would go and he would pay, $5 or $6 for a Sunday New York Times because of their chess article. That a beat writer who covered chess for the New York Times, that was their job. Though that era is gone. Now if you go to the press pool at a fight, you're going to see more content creators and commentators than you are going to see journalists. I am not a journalist. Full stop. I am a hobbyist who comes on here and talks about the hard journalism that I read or the fights that I watch. I do not have sources. I do not report news. To the extent that I regurgitate news, I always cite the source and I put it in my description and I tell you where it came from, and then I commentate on it. We're in an era of media, not just boxing media, but of media where we conflate the two. Commentators are not journalists. Sometimes journalists do commentate based on their hard reporting. They will report hard news in the boxing world and then tell you what they think about that and the ramifications. There are very few hard journalists left in boxing media, at least in the United States. Perhaps the one of the old vestiges, what I've talked about when you're talking about print media, coming from that style and that tradition, is Dan Rayfield, formerly of ESPN, formerly of USA Today. Now he has his own Substack. He has a great X account that you need to follow, and you need to subscribe to his Substack. He is the best of the hard news journalists left in boxing media. Jake Donovan's pretty good. Chris Mannix is pretty good. There are a couple others out there. Some of the former journalists in boxing have sort of turned into commentators because you really can't make money with hard journalism alone anymore. Again, I am not a journalist. I am here to just riff with other boxing fans. This is not, I would love to be monetized, but that's something that I want to accomplish just to say that I accomplished it. I have a career. I have a family. I have other aspirations. This is an outlet for me. That's not to say that the other people who are full-time boxing commentators, journalists, or creators don't have other things. Of course they do. I'm just trying to let you know that I'm not that big a deal. So to go back to what Luke Thomas was criticizing Coppinger for, and my goodness, it was a massive takedown. He is basically saying, and if Luke Thomas wants to disagree with me, feel free, but that Coppinger masquerades as a journalist, and he's not. And I tend to think that there's some truth to that. He is not independent. He works for Ring Magazine, which is owned by Turki Al-Sheikh, which is therefore controlled by him. It is controlled by a promotional company that has interests in the sport. And just the mere fact that you work for them will affect your objectivity. You can pretend it doesn't, but it does. True independence is rare. There are people who, even if you worked for ESPN during the Top Rank days, you're going to have at least people questioning your objectivity as far as the criticisms of Top Rank go. That's just the way it goes. I don't criticize Mike Coppinger for working for Ring or any of their subsidiaries. What I will say is you can't say you're a journalist. Yes, you have sources. Yes, you report news. But you're really releasing press releases at that point. You're not really reporting. And that is a huge distinction when we're talking about hard journalism. That's one thing I've always admired about Chris Mannix, especially when it comes to the WBA. He will, right before a fight is starting on DAZN, one that they have promoted heavily, will go into a diatribe about how this fight is garbage because of the WBA. Now, maybe not the fight, but the fact that the WBA sanctioned it for whatever belt they decided to throw at it that day. That's rare. I wouldn't expect that from someone like Mike Coppinger. Hard news men and women are sort of a thing of the past in a sport like boxing. You think about Larry Merchant. A lot of people know him from HBO. He started off as a reporter for a paper in Philadelphia. Ron Borges of the Boston Globe. Again, Dan Rayfield again, USA Today, later ESPN. These were journalists. They weren't cheerleaders. They weren't PR people for a promotion or for a broadcaster or for a sanctioning body or for a boxing commission. And I think that's what Luke Thomas is saying here. Now, is there a hint of jealousy? Yeah, perhaps there is. It seems as though, Luke Thomas is out there hustling for views, and that's the nature of the business these days. That's what it's become. Because anybody, case in point, can turn on their iPhone, buy a $30 microphone, and create content. Whereas Mike Coppinger has made it in a sense that he is, working daily on boxing and getting paid to do it, and not in terms of per view. The final thought I'll leave you with this video is just make sure you know the difference. We have seen a lot of legitimate boxing commentators make mistakes in reporting news. I still remember when Alexander Usyk was going to fight Deontay Wilder next. Everyone wants to rush to be the first and to not be right. And I'd say Dan Rafael is probably the best active, hard journalist in boxing right now. Does he always get it right? No. But when he's wrong, he's still properly sourced and doing it in an ethical way. And that's what's missing. We have too many people thinking that they're journalists who have no idea about journalistic ethics. And they just, for lack of a better term, because we don't print anymore, but print. Whatever you got, print it. That's sort of the difference between TMZ and a hard news source. This is a great sport, and it's with great people, and there's some outstanding content creators, and I love the fact that I've just kind of entered that community. But I am not a journalist, and I have no aspirations to be. I don't ever want you to think of this program as something that is based on my independent reporting, other than when I firsthand watch a fight and tell you what I think. But as far as happenings in the sport, as far as, hard sourcing of behind the scenes, that's not me, and it's never going to be me. And if that's what you're looking for here, I suggest you watch someone else. Thomas eviscerated Coppinger, and I think some of it was warranted, some of it wasn't. But we have to understand that when a promotional entity buys a print legacy magazine and essentially owns a broadcaster, and then is essentially signed to another broadcaster in Paramount Plus, we are going to lose objectivity. And that's why we're here. That's why guys like me are here. That's why guys like you are here. Keep watching. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.